Hey, how are you?
How are you doing? Traveling a bit?
Got you down here.
Oh, there's my. I have a sign to see.
It was turned over.
Thank you. How are you today? Sun's out, right?
Rick, I had a voicemail that you asked for.
No.
You got it.
Yes, I
So the voicemail is just a double. All right, never mind then.
Thank you.
No problem.
Need another chair.
You know, the chair? Gosh, Jeff, you're right.
We'll get you set up.
We will, absolutely. You can join us right over here.
Is Max coming tonight?
Yeah, Max coming?
I don't think I heard from him.
You don't.
I do plenty of eggs.
You want me to get you? No, this is fine. This is fine. It's not comfortable. They're fine. You won't be able to fall asleep.
It'll keep me awake. You think that? Yeah, hurt.
That's such a long time since we've had a full meeting.
What's
It's a long time since we've had like everyone here.
Yeah. I know, it's on my scarf. Actually, I don't have any. I was gonna lose that stinking game, so I told my husband to text me.
MSU?
I know, I was playing some spiders. Did they lose? They're just come through. I know. Makes me so mad.
Have you got connection to Iowa?
No, it's just, I went to 2 Big Ten schools, so then, you know, when you get into the conference, you start cheering for your conference, so.
No, I agree.
I mean, I was actually cheering Michigan today.
Oh, I think you teach them.
I teach at Michigan State.
Your hair didn't turn out.
I know, I made it through. I did it for the conference. I did it for the good of the conference.
Good for you. Let's not introduce anything really controversial at planning commission.
Oh, there's Max.
Oh, all right.
I'll give him a chair.
All right, thanks.
Hello, man. Hi, Max.
Hey, Max.
We'll get you a chair.
Where do you want me to sit, does it matter?
Right there, we'll be fine. We're grabbing you a chair right now.
Stand by. Literally sliding here. Thank you. Break his hip?
Yeah.
He's over at his hardware and he's, well, he does my grandpa, not my dad.
Oh, gotcha. Did he come home today, Max?
I think so, yeah.
All right, it's 5:30. Seemed like a long minute, didn't it? All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Jeff, would you start the roll call?
Absolutely. Al Dyke.
Here.
Barry Lustgarten.
Here.
Our new member to the board. Everybody, if you'd like to welcome Barry.
Oh, hi.
Mark Boudet.
Here.
Bill Mulder.
Here.
George Pete.
Here.
Bob Toma.
Here.
Emily DeVay.
Here.
Vanessa Warren.
Here.
Rick Charchinsky.
Here.
We have a full board today.
Thanks.
Oh, and Max Bassett. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to forget you, Max. You're important.
For sure. All right, well, welcome everybody. First order of business is to take a look at the minutes from February 17th.
I move to approve the minutes.
Anybody identified any corrections or improvements? Not me either. We have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second? Second. Who was that, Rick or Al? Yeah, thank you. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Thanks, the minutes are approved. All right. Next item is public comment and correspondence. Thanks, everybody in the audience for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to hearing from you. This is the part where you have something to offer that's not related to something on the agenda. You could let us know what's on your mind. If you're on the agenda, then we'll really hear from you. Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to introduce myself. My name is Andrea Jacobs, and I am the newly appointed Emmett County Housing Ready Program Director for Housing North. And this, in my travels throughout the county, is an enormous commission, which is really exciting to work with. I have been doing some work in Harbor Springs and introduce myself to some of you individually. But I haven't been here to a meeting yet, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to do that. I know you have some important things on the agenda regarding housing issues, so I'm here for that as well. But lots of other things happening in the community that I can be helpful with, or do some homework, do some legwork, answer some questions, identify needs. So we don't know quite what that relationship looks like yet, but I'm here to think of all things housing for the next 3 years all over Emmett County. So you're a big part of Emmett County economically, and you have a very special place in my heart because I come from a family that has been here for a long time. So I live now in Maple River Township, but I did have a house on Lakeshore Drive for about 7 years. So thank you very much for your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me for any issues housing related in the next couple of years, okay?
And Andrea's position is funded in part by the city of Harbor Springs. We made a 3-year, $10,000 per year commitment, if I remember right. And so did the city of Petoskey, and so did a township or two.
Yep. Resort Township and yep, some nonprofits, some local community groups. There was lots of public and private sort of energy put into this position, and just the necessary to have somebody who is focusing full-time, nonstop on some strategies and making sure that we're making really intentional decisions over the next few years, because we're all up against the same wall.
Right, well, thank you, Andrea. Does anyone else have any comments that are not related to something on the agenda? All right, thanks very much. Well, first order of business is 655 Pine Street property, lot split condominium request by Matt. I see Matt on there. Hello, Matt. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm across the bay at McLaren, and I would be there, but I have pneumonia. So sorry to have to do this like this, but I'm there with
Good choice. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I hope you're feeling okay.
I'm feeling fine. I think I'll be discharged tomorrow. It's
Good. Good. All right. Let's see. We heard this request for the preliminary approval of the condo and lot split request at the last meeting. And then we were to look at the first 3 items that needed approval and assess those and decide if we could offer preliminary approval to Matt's plan. And there was one major thing missing, and I think we offered a bunch of ideas that for him to consider. And so here we are back. Larry has provided an updated memo and assessment of the request. And Larry and Jeff, do you want to set the stage for us? What we should and
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions that we had at that last meeting. And one of the things that I passed out before the meeting was an email exchange that I had with Benchmark. One of the questions that you guys had for me was, how does the floodplain play into any decisions that we make, and what measures are in place already to handle that? So one of the things that I passed out was I reached out and asked Benchmark that question. We also have some other information that we're going to be looking at later that kind of addresses the same topic. But essentially, their answer was that there are already some methods in place to address these things. They said that when you're within a reasonable proximity to the slope of the bluff, they said that there are things that the building department can make sure that the builder puts in place, such as, I think they mentioned some slope stabilization measures, such as some erosion mats that they can put down while they're disturbing the soil and things like that. The building department would handle the implementation and make sure that they're doing those things as needed. And then the initial part of it would be that we would look at making sure we're not disturbing the floodplain in their site plan itself for zoning review as well. So I believe that answers the question that I was asked to look into regarding what measures are in place for floodplain and building within close proximity to that. The other question that we had was some of the things that are in place or could be used for the review of the plan and what could be implemented into potential conditions or discussion with the applicant. And I think, Larry, you had some really good thoughts on what was appropriate or not for us through that. So I think you can maybe answer that better than I can.
All right, thank you. The memo that I updated was first initiated in February 11th that you reviewed at the last planning commission meeting. Thus the identification of the two items that were missing, which was a comprehensive legal description and a map illustrating where the three parcels involved in this development were actually located. Now, they have submitted that information. So the three items that they had to submit for a preliminary plan review have been met by the applicant. I also asked several questions in the comment period of my memo about various things about adjacent lands that appeared to be available potentially for development adjacent to this piece, but only really accessible from this piece. And I know you talked about that a little bit last time. I raised the question, has the applicant really addressed that issue? It's not one of the review criteria, but it's kind of like under the category of planning, because we cherish every square foot of land here in the city because we're not making any more of it. And as each development occurs, which we don't have a lot, we start diminishing that inventory. So we want to try to get as much as we can out of the land that we have. And when we can identify opportunities, we need to do so and ask the applicant to explore that opportunity. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. Maybe the landowners adjacent to Lake Street have no interest whatsoever in selling the back portion of their lots for additional housing. That may be possible, but you don't know until you write them a letter or knock on their door. I talked about stormwater management, and that's very important on this piece of property because of the steep slope and how that's going to work. And has the applicant had any time to identify any of that? I know Benchmark has a conversation with Jeff, but the placement of a stormwater retention basin and how the water gets from the top to the bottom of that hill is extremely important, in my opinion, not only from an erosion control standpoint, but from a water quality standpoint, because that's a direct flush out into the bay, one of our treasured high quality resources here in the community. We talked about One of the other comments was existing accessory buildings and what the applicant was doing with those through this development. I did not see anything come in regarding that from the applicant on any of those additional comment areas. They addressed what was essentially required, but those ancillary areas had not. Now, they still have another approval process to go through with us, and all these items, I think, should be addressed. I just wanted to give everyone, if you will, a little heads up and try to get some pre-conversation to that final submission out there. So we're all aware of it. So we can, if we think it's important and want to make sure that the applicant addresses those issues with that final submission, you could put that as a condition of your preliminary approval at this time. You can certainly do that, is that the applicant needs to address, A, B, C, and D, if you desire to have that as part of that preliminary approval of this development. From a zoning standpoint, all the lots comply with the requirements of the zoning code. Size, location, there's a buildable area on each of those lots that's reasonable. But there's things that need to be cleaned up, like accessory buildings, and it's going to be important to figure out how that's going to be handled. Stormwater is very important, and are there other adjacent land opportunities for development? And I particularly pointed out those long, narrow lots adjacent to Lake Street that move from north to south. So, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we could do this a couple ways. Planning commissioners could weigh in at this point, or we could ask Matt to give us an update on his plans. Why don't we, you'd be all right if we started that way? All right, and maybe some of the questions will be answered. Matt, can you tell us what's changed in the last month?
Sure. So basically, I'll start at the top of the suggested questions. As far as the adjacent land, I did talk to one of the landowners that would be off of Lake coming into the Claridge Court, so to speak. One of them is not interested. I have drafted a letter to Thrush, and we'll be sending that out upon preliminary approval. But we are not opposed to having adding property to it, just as long as it makes sense and that we can get more out of the property. It makes sense for the city. It makes sense for everybody. So I have talked to one neighbor who's not interested, and I've drafted a letter to Leroy to answer the first question. The stormwater management question, we will totally identify in the plan that will come out for final approval. That'll be designed by Benchmark, and it will reflect how the water is going to get from the roads and stuff like that down into the valley there. And there'll be a detailed plan that details that Benchmark will be doing. New Lake Street construction between two dwellings adjacent to the street. The buffer, as I said at the last meeting, we're not opposed to putting a string of trees down on both sides of the road to give the neighbors a buffer between their property and ours. I think that we're planning on that. Number 4, will there be a tremendous number of trees removed? As I said in the last meeting, it is not our intention to remove any trees that aren't in the boxes where we're building. We want to keep that as natural as possible, and we think that that's part of the charm of what we're trying to create there. But that would also be addressed on the final plan through the landscaping plan that would be submitted for final approval. The existing buildings, number 5, we're demolishing those as soon as we start doing the clearing of the road and that stuff. They'll take out all 3 of those built. We've already taken down 2 of the buildings, and there's one barn left that we're storing some stuff until we start construction on. But that will be completely removed as we're building a house there. So that's getting removed. Number 6 is if you have any interest or questions. So I guess those are my answers to the questions that you guys have asked me. And if you have any additional questions, please let me know, and I will do my best to answer.
Before we open up, I remember one other conversation point we had, and that was about the shipping container and a vehicle that may or may not be running in a camper. Jeff and Matt, you guys come together on that?
I've reached out to them and let them know what issues need to be addressed and not addressed, and we'll make sure that that's done before this is finalized. Yeah.
Matt, are you in agreement with that?
Yes, I am in total agreement. We're planning on getting rid of the canister. The car is operational right now. It's my brother-in-law's summer car that he uses. And so that's operational. We can move that, but yeah, that all three of his items will be addressed by the time we move forward.
So those would be resolved before you come back for final review. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they'll be resolved as soon as the container will be removed when we start construction, because that's considered an outbuilding at this point. Because we removed the other two outbuildings so that we could have the container there, and that's just considered the same as the shed. But we won't be leaving it there once we start construction, because obviously that's another house is going there, so it won't be remaining there permanently.
And I forget, is that container on the lot that the big house is on, the big existing house, or?
Right now, yes, there's 3 parcels that it's on the same parcel as their existing home. Yeah.
Yeah, but so that there's a possible hitch there, if I understand it right. So if the lot split occurs first, then the container is like a freestanding accessory
Right.
building.
And that's why we'll need to make sure.
Isn't allowed, so kind of a.
That's why we'll need to make sure that it's addressed, because
Chicken and egg.
if we split the lots, then we're creating a lot that would have an accessory structure on it on its own, which we don't permit. So it would be a requirement regardless, even if if the shipping container wasn't there and the 2 garages were there, there would still be the requirement that those accessory buildings would need to be removed. And we can do that. We've done it in the past with various projects, administratively or on the planning commission, where we've approved the split with the condition that it needs to be addressed before final approval is done. There's also another accessory structure that's farther back, an older garage, that would need to be addressed through this project also, that when we finalize things, we would need to make sure that all of that is addressed, because we're creating these new parcels and we can't leave these buildings out there as accessory structures on their own properties.
Okay. Commissioners, any thoughts?
I have some thoughts about the road coming in from Lake Street and the utilities. I agree that it would be neat if we could pull the back of Leroy's lot, John Cupp's lot, and there are 2 others that seem potential lots that would be buildable if they were split from the Lake Street part of the front part of their lots. And but so that the developer would have to grant easements across his property for driveways, I believe. And also he'd have to include in his sizing of his infrastructure, he'd have to include the sizing for the 3 or 4 other houses as he does this. And then another thing is, I think, Matt, you told us that you're going to do a private road.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, then there are no issues, because you've only got 65 feet on Lake Street and you need 66 feet to put a public road in. Unless you, no, for it to be public, when you go to the smaller road standards, it becomes a private road. I learned that at our place. So those were my only comments, so.
You want me to? Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. The Clarence Court will be part of the HOA, or the Property Owners Association, for all the houses that we're building. And that'll be covered, the paving and the maintenance of that road will be covered under their condo docs. As far as the giving an easement, we're not we want to help develop. I want to see things get built. If I can give an easement and somebody wants to build back there and they want to pay their portion of the road maintenance and stuff, and then I'm absolutely open to that. So that's kind of, and I reached out to the one people right next to Cups, in between Clarence Court and Cups, and they're not interested. And as I said, it would be great if we could get Thrush to do it. We could put in something over there that would be good. But I can't force somebody to sell their land or to develop their land. So I'm open to it, though, completely open.
Mark, looks like you got some thoughts.
Well, I do, I always do. I guess, I certainly understand this is used by right. I totally understand that and support that. But given its sensitive location, I looked a little bit deeper into this. And Larry mentions in his comments on page 1 that the consistency of the plans will be plans with all applicable provisions of essentially to meet all applicable provisions of city code of Harbor Springs zoning code. And later on, it mentions that the submission requirements on condominium land subdivision plans shall be submitted for review as required by section 50.20. And that sort of opens up the door a little bit, I think, to maybe looking at being a little bit more, I don't know how to say this, looking at maybe there's a requirement here to protect the rights of the surrounding neighbors to some degree, because they were here last month talking about that maybe, I don't feel much more comfortable with this if that we're able to define this a little bit more along the lines of what we have to do in this site plan review process. Where we're looking more specifically at maybe not actual structures, because you can't provide those because they haven't been designed yet. But I look at some of the areas of some of these smaller lots, which are right on the slope, the really steep slope, and very limited areas that are flat that can be built on. So these are sensitive areas. There's a lot of trees. There's a lot of tight neighbors around the area. And so my question, I guess, to Larry and to Jeff is it reasonable to look at this phase to push towards some type of conditional approval that would limit the buildable area? Because right now the buildable area is the entire lot is not within the setback requirements. If we would actually show an area where there was actually a footprint where a potential building could be, I think that would go a long way towards mitigating some of the issues with some of the trees, views, neighbors, and all of that. So my question, Larry, is that a reasonable interpretation of this? And is this the point at which that would come out? Because if we get to the second phase of this, after giving preliminary approval, is there room at that point to address some of these issues which we have to look at in the site plan review process?
I guess in my opinion, if we have a concern regarding the placement of a house on one of those lots that face the ravine, we could make a reasonable request as a condition that they identify the actual construction, a more confined construction envelope for a building site on those particular properties that you want to identify. And those may be the 4 properties that really are involved with a small building envelope where new homes could be built. Thus expressing your concerns about slope, erosion, stormwater runoff, stabilization of the area would be all elements that would be associated with that concern. So thus the rationale for restricting that building envelope, which they identify in this graphic as green, may very possibly, given your concern as a planning commission for that, be constrained more by the applicant in the submission for the second stage. It would not be necessarily the best course or response and discussion to have after they've put an awful lot of work into putting together the final plan. It's best to get those concerns out now.
Right, because normally if this were out somewhere, you have neighbors pocketed all the way around it, and it wasn't in the drain, it wasn't with all the trees and all the natural resources which are impacted by this, to me wouldn't be that big of issue. But given its location and the sensitivity of the sites, I feel it's appropriate to add some language if we are decided to go forward with the preliminary approval.
I think it would be a reasonable condition for their consideration to be added with a positive action at this time.
So that would be a request.
It would be a condition worded something like, we respectfully request that, as a condition, that they address the placement of houses on, I don't have the numbers right in front of me with what I have on my, I can't quite read that. So whatever those proposed lot numbers would be on those particular lots, that they address the placement of a home on those particular lots.
And the other thing that would come into play on this also would be, it's one thing to locate the buildable area and then also the construction area around it. Because, bad things can happen when you get people on big machines. So I think that I would like to have some consideration in this motion now that we could also be able to use that in the final, that's sort of like a check in the final, that we also understand where the construction area is going to be, because some of the layout areas up here are going to be extremely limited. And, for a proper layout area, it's going to require a certain amount of square feet of flat area, or whether there's something progressive that can be done to mitigate that issue. Maybe the plan would be that, part of the roadway would be used as a layout area for each project as it's built in series or something like that.
Right, yes. I
I only bring this up because it's such a limited site and it's such a sensitive area.
Yes, I don't disagree.
So a limit of disturbance is what you're interested in, and you're also interested in some sort of like soil erosion control plan.
No, that's standard within the building code and at the county level. All that stuff will happen automatically. My concern is just how big are these actual structures going to be? Because once they're sold, someone could say, well, they said 1,200 square feet, but I really want 5,200 square feet.
So I'm gonna go beyond that.
Yeah, and so this is our one chance to maybe say something about that if everybody else thought that was appropriate. Because these are used by right, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's just that given what was said last month here, and given that I do believe this references our site plan approval process.
Right.
And within the site plan approval process, we can address each of these issues very clearly, and we can sort of hang our hat on that if we'd like.
Larry,
Yes.
or Jeff, maybe you might know this better, but is there an opportunity here to see some sort of variance to push that setback, decrease that front setback so they can push that buildable area closer to the front of the property, and perhaps maybe, I don't know if that's something that is possible or they even want to do, but it's just a thought.
I think, if we're looking at the possibility of doing something like that, now through this process of approval is the appropriate time to do that. We should try our best to create lots that have buildable areas that don't need a variance. We shouldn't be putting ourselves in a position where we create a lot that's a legal lot of record that someone then comes in and says, well, I need a variance to be able to build on this. We should do our best to try and avoid that. This is an interesting area. We have made some allowances at this point in adjusting setbacks that differ from setbacks in other areas. And the example that I use is the condominium project that we just worked with an amendment on over between 2nd and 3rd Street. When they originally put those together, that's in the R1B zoning district, and they wanted setbacks that were more similar to the R1C neighborhood of Southern and Crandall's right behind them. So they asked for some special considerations to be able to build closer to the front property line. With them asking that allowed us to say, okay, we're willing to offer you that, but then we're going to add these further restrictions to limit in other ways, giving you that benefit. So, and this might be a good example. If we have this concern with the floodplain on the rear of the property, they've shown, they have gone through and shown, which I like, that they have not left that buildable area going all the way back to what a normal rear yard setback would be. They voluntarily already pulled those back so that the buildable area does not go into the floodplain. And in some other areas where we just have a normal lot, those property owners that have a buildable area that invades into the floodplain have gone to FEMA to then get special permission to build into it using special means. They've already shown that their buildable area ends at the floodplain. If we feel that that needs to be moved a little bit farther away from the floodplain, we could maybe ask and offer that in doing that, in helping to stay farther away from the floodplain, maybe we would let them have a 15-foot front yard setback or a 10-foot front yard setback to give them a little bit more room so that they can build farther away from the floodplain. And now I think would be the time to do that, as opposed to approving something and then 3 or 4 years from now, somebody saying, I need to build and I need to move farther forward.
Right.
That's somewhat common with a cul-de-sac, isn't it? And cul-de-sacs take a tremendous amount of land.
For the turnaround?
Yeah. And so by going with that design of the road, a lot of that area that is the furthest away from the floodplain goes to a road and not to a house.
But that's required though.
Yeah. Whenever we have somebody
Right,
putting in a
but
road, yeah.
but changing that setback when there's a cul-de-sac, I would think would be somewhat appropriate, because this cul-de-sac just takes a tremendous amount of land.
I'd agree with that. That's a potential option that we could, ask if this condition is appropriate regarding a rear yard to be farther away from the floodplain, but then offer as an exchange the ability to be a little bit closer in the front, potentially, if that's something that you guys are for and that the applicant likes the idea of as well.
If I might for a second, yeah, I mean, we're totally not opposed to that. I mean, we tried to design the lots so that they conformed with all of the zoning laws and that we weren't asking for a variance, obviously. But that makes sense to move it up, and it gives us a more buildable lot there. But right now, we're obviously following all the zoning code, all the zoning laws, but we certainly would be up for looking at that. And if you wanted to discuss that during the plan review or state that now for that, I can work with Jeff and we can do something like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm definitely not opposed to that. What we depict at this point is obviously what the zoning codes are. So we had to make sure that we could build in with those. And I kind of went through it at the last meeting that we're trying to build, 1,700 square foot houses with a garage included. And those will fit into those easily, will fit into those spaces. But, usually as part of the planning process, you don't have to show exactly where the house is going. You show where the buildable is. But I'm certainly open to, if we want to move those and allow us a little bit less setback, and we agree to move the houses closer and we can depict that, I can have Benchmark depict where we're planning on building the houses during the next stage, because I'm going to have to show that for utility layout and all that kind of stuff anyways. I'm totally open to that. That's something I didn't want to ask for anything. So I just kind of went with what's the law. But if you guys are open to that, I am totally open to that. To answer your question, I guess that's my 2 cents.
Let's pause on that topic for a minute. How do people feel about that concept? Would you be in favor of shifting the buildable envelope forward 5, 7, 10 feet? And
I am
that much farther.
Pull them out of the ditch. It just makes sense.
It would be better to do it now than say we'll go with this and people start building and then somebody else ask for a variance and get it, and then you won't have a uniformity to the houses. So it would be better to do it now.
So I misspoke.
I believe the language in the codes doesn't allow us to create lot splits where a variance is going to be necessary to allow them to build. I think they have to be pretty clean splits so that they have a good buildable space on the new lot.
Yeah, agreed. Like if we were creating a lot that only had a 500 square foot buildable envelope, we'd be creating a bad lot. that somebody would come in and say, there's no way I'm building a 500 square foot home. I need a variance to be able to do something here. And that would be a mistake of us. And Larry just informed me that I misspoke. The property is between 2nd and 3rd Street. That was a cluster development. And there are different rules in place there that allowed us to do that there. I thought that they were both through the condominium plan, and I misspoke there. So sorry if I led us down a poor path.
But we hear from this side of the table regarding the idea of a possible shift of the buildable envelope forward.
Yeah, I like the idea of moving it towards the court and making it seem a little, I don't know if the word safer, and having more green space in the back. I think that would be very nice.
What's the current setback right now?
20 feet in the front, 35 in the back, 30. So this would only work if the whole envelope moves towards the court.
Yeah.
Wouldn't work if we just make the envelope bigger.
So if, I guess the idea would be if you move it 10 feet to the front, just move it from the 10 feet away from the floodplain. That's pretty simple, I think, for a request.
And I think we're open to, I'm open to that. So if you guys want to do that, you can make that a condition. And as part of the plan review, I will depict that on benchmark, draw that so that it depicts that. I think it makes sense too.
And I think it also, and to the point of, showing a defined buildable area, if benchmark could also show that, just what that would look like on the lots, as far as, okay, so here's the square and it's X amount of square feet, and within that X amount of square feet, there's going to be a certain size building. I think that'll go a long way towards understanding just, where the most reasonable place for these structures to be would be. And then that would also show the neighbors, the limits of tree removal and all that kind of stuff. And I think it would go a long way towards, making this, very successful and very much accepted.
The green shaded area, the green shaded area is the buildable envelope, is that right?
That's what I thought it was.
Well, yeah, but I mean a defined one where, okay, this is, it's a 2,000 square foot building, but you're showing there's going to be like, 4,000 square foot box in which that 2,000 feet can be, something that's more realistic instead of showing the entire thing. I think just seeing what a 2,000 square foot box looks like in that green area will go a long way towards answering a lot of questions. Okay. I know Benchmark could do that very easily.
Yeah, no, they will. And I, as I said, I have to do that for the next plan because
right.
I've got to show all the utilities and how that come in. I've got to show all the stormwater's going in and out of there. So I've got to show, I'm planning on showing locations for the next one, for the next plan, for the final plan review. I got to, because I've got to show all that. So that's all makes sense to me.
Okay, cool.
So I may have opened a can of worms with making that suggestion. Larry and I are frantically now looking at the zoning code, because there's a difference between a condominium approved lot split, a cluster development. It might be doable, but it might mean that we have to add in an actual public hearing to the process for approval, because we're creating the ability to deviate from the standard rules a little bit here, if that's something that the applicant is willing to do.
I mean, I'm trying to keep it as straightforward as possible. I don't know that I want to create a whole nother step for this process. Because I don't think that I can show those boxes with what I've got here and just stay down the same process as I am on the next plan. And I'm not opposed to that. I guess, that's another step, I guess, to have a public hearing. I prefer not to do that because I'd rather be able to move forward and show the envelopes. I'm pretty confident that I can build the 1,700 square foot in the green boxes, and I planned on showing those in the next stage anyways. So to add a whole public hearing on that, I'm a little reluctant to that just because it's a whole nother month or two and another couple steps.
Well, hearing can be the same.
Okay, as an alternative to a cul-de-sac, if I remember correctly, and this goes back several years, but so do I. We had a development, a lot split at the end of Ottawa Street.
Yep.
And as opposed, because of the hill that was there that went up as you go to the north, They ended up putting in a T, because the key is snow removal and to get emergency vehicles in and out.
Turnaround.
And so the applicant at the time suggested that, and the city agreed to that alternative road design. If you employed a T as opposed to a cul-de-sac, that's going to push, that's going to take up less land in this situation. And we're virtually serving off of the cul-de-sac 3 building sites. And I think the one at the end of Ottawa Street, there were 5 building sites up there that was utilized for, if I recall correctly. Nobody else is going to remember that but me. Al may, I don't know. You've been around a long time too. So
The cul-de-sac takes up a tremendous amount of space, and it's all space that we would want the buildings to be, you know, I mean, it's all
It's all
higher
flat.
ground, it's flat, it's not gonna require the grading, it's not gonna, you know, have all of the erosion issues. I mean, it's a road, it's a big road that is now in that spot, and if we could do something else like tee it, or, I mean, yes, safety is important, but
Yeah.
cul-de-sacs take an enormous amount of space.
Lots one and three are the only ones that.
my
need
suggestion would
cul-de-sac.
be to have the applicant work with the city engineer. Oh, wait, who happens to be their engineer, or alternative design to a cul-de-sac that may be, that they could talk to the city about, Victor, and or the DPW, as to be an acceptable design solution for this situation, to accomplish larger building envelopes in upland areas, if you will, on those lots. I think it's 4, 5, and 6, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If I can read all of those right from what I had up earlier, just as an idea, as an alternative design.
Sure. Can I talk for a second? I'm totally up for that idea. It makes a lot more sense. The reason we put the cul-de-sac in is because Jeff and I, after looking at the zone and the actual zoning laws that are applicable to this project, that's what made us go to the cul-de-sac. I think a T makes a lot more sense. I know Cups allows Ts because I put them in before, and that, you know, that makes that would allow a lot more space. So I mean, you know, again, if you want to put that as a specification for the next plan that we switch over to that, and you're, again, I wasn't trying to ask for a variance at all, so that's why you have the cul-de-sac. I agree 100% that the cul-de-sac is a waste of space, but that's what the code says.
So it looks like there's a couple different options. One's called a hammerhead T turnaround, an alternative T turnaround, and they both will use considerably less area than what that does. So that might allow automatically to increase, you know, to move the structures away from the slopes and give you, you know, arguably, you know, a better building site, you know, building envelope.
It's gonna be cheaper construction because they're not gonna be on the slope. It's all around, it's gonna be better.
Win-win for everybody.
Yes.
It certainly looks like it helps address the issue with lots 3 and 4. I don't know that it would change the situation for lot 5 there. Lot 5, which is, I think, the smallest lot anyway. Because we wouldn't be gaining any ground on that one. Do we see any issues with lot 5? Because I don't know that changing from the cul-de-sac to a T would change anything for that lot specifically.
Well, in my opinion, it's not for us to resolve the issue about how that gets designed this evening, but rather to express our concerns, place them as conditions on an action if you desire to do that this evening, and let the applicant go back to work and figure out how to create larger envelopes on some of these parcels. So we're not designers, we're not experts in land design.
Being that this is a floodplain, do we have to give any consideration to the future homeowners and how they may or may not be insured? I noticed somewhere in some of the literature, the target price for these homes was $200,000-$300,000. Potentially someone buys one of these homes or builds one. and suddenly can't afford insurance because we allowed them to build too close to this floodplain. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
You want me to answer? I guess you can't build in the blue area as the floodplain, so you're not going to be able to get insurance on anything that's built in that blue plane. But you can get, just like my sister's house, you can certainly get a house insured off of the floodplain or in any of the green envelopes.
Okay,
We carry insurance on the other house. Obviously, it's further off the floodplain, but that's how insurance would work on this. The answer from, I mean, I'm not an insurance guy either, but that's kind of how it works. That's why the blue's outline there. It's not just for the water, it's for that as well. You can't build in a floodplain.
So Matt, do you favor taking a look at a redesign on the road, or do you favor keep the cul-de-sac and perhaps shift each of the buildable envelopes towards the cul-de-sac by 10 feet?
Honestly, I'd want to talk to my sister a little bit about that. I would like to look at both options and maybe come back and talk to the board, during the next process. I think we're going to have a lot of things that I need to work with, we need to work on together to make this all happen. So I'd like to continue the process moving along, obviously, as the developer, but I think that both ideas are good ideas. It sounds like after hearing Jeff, because of the cluster development, they were allowed to move those within the law. And maybe the T, you guys as the planning commission are allowed to do at your discretion. So if you want to put in a T, I'm happy to have Benchmark redesign that as the next phase. And you guys obviously have to approve the plans and the specs as final approval. So if you want to put that as a stipulation tonight, that we explore that option, I am happy to do so. I guess is my answer.
Okay. In terms of process and timing, if you did favor the idea of moving the building envelope up 10 feet, and it did require a public hearing, we're not saying it has to be a month from now. So, wait, Jeff may be telling me I am saying that.
No, I was just going to further clarify a little bit here.
Okay.
So cluster development is a special land use request in the R1 districts. But I believe that we could coincide. It's going to take Matt probably a little bit. He might have, because there's a number of other things that he needs to provide to answer numbers 4 through 9 throughout this. One of those is stormwater drainage plan and all that stuff. So that will be part of his final submission. Basically, he's going to prepare all of the documents that would make up a master deed and the drawings that go with that we need to verify. We could, I believe, coincide the special land use request for cluster development with that second review of the final sort of site plan and everything, so that it wouldn't really add another day. We could do them, I believe, at the same time, or have one follow the other at the same meeting.
I think that sounds fine to me. And in the meantime, I think, I think it's going to take us two months to get all that stuff together. So, but it shouldn't take that long. I mean, I don't know how, Benchmark's pretty busy right now, but I will get them working on that immediately and hopefully have plans back to Jeff that you guys can take a look at and give me feedback on. And I want to go the right direction, which makes the most sense. So I'm happy to do that. Or whatever, I want to work and make it work.
Maybe the answer is a combination of both, changing the road and moving up the setbacks.
Yeah. So where we are tonight is that the applicant has asked for preliminary approval. There are three aspects that he needed to satisfy. Larry says that each of those 3 have been satisfied. We're discussing some possible requests and suggested modifications do you feel like we're in a position where we could proceed with the preliminary approval if we phrase the requests properly tonight? Commissioners.
I do have one more suggestion if planning commission consider, and it's about the road. Maybe just an ask that he consult the city or the city arborist on recommended tree species to be planted, even though it's a private road. Only because the tree board had been working on trees that are more, maybe salt tolerant, maybe better for buffer trees. It wouldn't be a requirement, but maybe just to reach out to the city and see what species are recommended for street tree plantings. If that's something Matt is open to.
I am open to that. Absolutely open to that. Yes, I have no problem with that.
Back to you, commissioners. Do you feel like we're in a position to give preliminary approval if we can phrase a few extra requests properly?
Conditions. Oh, you think so, Larry?
I think so. I think we've displayed to Mr. Summers the concerns the planning commission have. And I think they're legitimate concerns. I think Matt also sees the waste of land at the flat area on the site with the cul-de-sac, and if an alternative design makes it better, it actually makes lots more marketable. It's cheaper, if I'm going to pay $200,000 for a lot, okay, and I have to put in another 200 to get the grading right and extra construction costs, it makes a lot of sense that we can make some reasonable adjustments now that would help.
But does it make sense though to give a conditional approval? Or are we just approve it and then review it and say, hey, the next time around?
The approval would be, you would approve the preliminary submission and they have to give consideration to, the stormwater, the building envelopes, the tree preservation and the road design. And we've given them all those suggestions about how to approach that. It could be the use of a cluster. It could be, just a T turnaround area. There are other alternatives. You found that section of the zoning code. I couldn't. And there's other things that can be employed here that help him address the environmental and the buildable concerns of the lots.
But we still have the option for the final phase to say, no, this isn't acceptable.
Or they're going to have the ability to say, this design idea that we had at the planning commission meeting wasn't reasonable, and here are the reasons why.
Right.
And this is why this is reasonable, and this is how we're going to address the building envelope concern that you have. We may not have thought of or have all the answers to how this site can best be used. Okay, we have to demonstrate to the applicant what our concerns are and let them address those in the best way they can and using the designers he have. We're not land development designers. Okay, that's not our job sitting here. We need to express concerns to the applicant so they can address those concerns when they submit for the next stage. If they haven't adequately addressed those concerns, that brings forward a different level of discussion, whether we approve that next level or not. So, okay.
All right, so let's take stock of the 3 or 4 requests that we have for the applicant. What I've got down here is asking the applicant to consider a new design for the buildable envelopes, to come up with a way to move them farther away from the drain. So I think that's powerful. That will address concerns that the neighbors have. Emmett County should be able to address the rest of the building requirements and the building inspections and during the process, so that's good. We would ask them to consider a road design modification, which could play into moving the envelope away from the drain. We'd ask them to consider screening on the entrance road for the neighbors, and we'd ask them to consider tree selection when the time comes.
And there was also, I think, Mark's comment about showing the actual developed building envelope areas, right?
Right, the building envelope and the required construction areas.
Yeah.
On scale.
Is it the building envelope, or is it more like where a building would likely be placed and how big
Yeah,
it would
I'm not
be.
exactly sure how that would turn.
Could be something like a sample, or
Building
example,
placement,
what's that?
building placement.
Example, building
So
place.
each one would have something similar to this then.
Right, just showing where a building can go, the area in which the building can go.
I think Mark's concern was really to see what that 2,000 square feet or whatever looks like compared to the green area.
Compared to 19,000.
Just to see what's going on.
All right. Bob,
Based on this design, as close to the downside as it is, are we stuffing too many buildings on this project?
it's permitted. All right. It's permitted by right. And the buyers will have to decide that, I guess. Good question. All right. Do you feel we're ready to proceed with a motion? How about a little?
I mean, someone make a motion.
So it's gonna be a complicated motion. You want me to try?
Yeah, why don't you give it?
All right, I got the notes here. All right.
Your notes are different from mine.
Whereas, therefore, I'd like to make a motion that we give this applicant preliminary approval for their lot split with 5 requests. The first is to consider a road design modification. The second is to consider ways to move the building envelope away from the slope, away from the drains. The third is to consider screening for the entrance road in respect for the existing neighbors. The fourth would be to show us some example building placement and scale on each of the lots. And the fifth would be to consider tree selection with the city's approved tree
Recommended.
choices. Yeah, recommended tree
Recommended
choices.
species selection.
I would be in favor of that with the caveat that the current building envelopes stay the same size, even with a road redesign or moving the front setback shorter or closer to said road.
And, what's the intent on that, George?
I mean, I feel like if this gets redesigned and then the building envelopes change, and then, yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult to keep track of exactly what the square footage is of all of these green this layout at the moment. And then if we get the example structures set on there, the scale of what we've looked at for the last hour here at the next meeting or in the next email won't really do much for me. I would likely think the same for most other people.
So would it be sufficient if the lots affected by the alternative road design, if they got bigger, would that be acceptable as opposed to smaller? Because what the goal here is to get lots 3 and 4 bigger.
To be bigger, okay.
Yes, because they're gonna move
Fair enough.
forward north of that site, so you can get a building envelope,
Yep, understood.
okay? Would that be permissible? You just
Yep.
don't want the lots to get smaller?
Correct.
Okay. Or to create additional lots?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
All right, their clarification, we have a motion on the table with.
We have a second. Would you like a roll call?
We have a motion on the table with 5 conditional or 5 strong requests. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Oh, I thought George seconded
Oh,
it.
you second?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Second with the caveat, yeah.
Yep,
Oh, the caveat was that the lots don't get,
don't get smaller.
the building envelope doesn't
So
get smaller.
Correct.
that'd be like the 6th thing then.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's the 6th thing, building envelope does not get smaller.
Are you still comfortable with the motion with his adjustment?
I am comfortable with the motion with that adjustment.
You ready for a roll call?
Let's have a roll call vote.
All right. Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Emily Dubé,
Yes.
Bob Toma,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Boudet,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Al Dyken.
Yes.
Motion passes. 9-0.
Okay. All right, Mr. Summers.
I thank you all for your time tonight, and I will do my best to address all your requests and get a new plan turned around and try and get this, keep this moving down the road. I appreciate all your time tonight and look forward to getting this done with you guys.
Hope you feel better and get out of there soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, you have a great night.
Okay, let's find the agenda again. See.
41 State Street.
All right. Next is we're going to have a public hearing, special land use request for 141 State Specialty Restaurant. But we've often found it helpful to have a presentation from the applicant before we make any comments. Is anyone here to talk about that project?
Let's start with opening the public hearing.
I'm thinking, Jeff, we have a presentation that will
Okay.
give the public a basis on which to comment. Commissioners, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, my name is Nick Liebler, architect and record with the owners and as applicant. What we are trying to bring forward for you for approval tonight is a conversion of an existing retail space at 141 State Street, right across from Pearson's Restaurant in downtown Harbor Springs, a little narrow storefront. The owners that purchased the building are trying to put in a small restaurant. It falls under the category of specialty restaurants as by right of the zoning code. It is as part of what they are doing, a modification of the existing storefront to improve the storefront design, open up the building a little bit more to the interior. The restaurant is something that is bringing to market something that doesn't exist in downtown Harbor Springs, kind of a healthy alternative type of restaurant. Part of what they have done is through the business plan that they have looked at, navigated the codes very appropriately of, not necessarily what they are as a specialty restaurant, but what they are not, more importantly. The city of Harbor Springs is very protective over what type of restaurants come in particular as to takeout restaurants, fast food restaurants, and those type of things. So, very clear in definition that this is a restaurant. It's going to be food that is served in restaurant style fashion. Part of what they are trying to do is open up the storefront and engage the interior space a little bit with the outside. The packet that you guys got as planning commissioners and was available to the public has some sample renderings of the storefront of what they're trying to do. So again, trying to provide some areas for seating that interacts a little bit with the sidewalk. Due to the nature of the site, we've got a pretty good fall that happens across the property, even though it is narrow. So, not conducive to having any type of dining out on the sidewalk space. Just the slope is too great to try to make that work. The site does back up to one of the public alleyways, and I know, trash is a particular concern in the city, especially in the summer times. Part of it because of what they do and the type of food they're going to serve. This is all, fresh produce, frozen fruits, vegetables, those type of things for what they're, preparing, I guess, at that point in time in the restaurant. So there's not going to be meats and those type of things that sit in refuse containers. All the trash is being handled through bins that would be removed from the site on a daily basis. So again, trying to mitigate any of those intrusions into neighboring properties that we have. You can kind of see up on the presentation that came through. This was part of the packet that was made available. The storefront is going to have seating that sits right up to the glass. There will be a door that opens up to the outside air. So that customers can sit at the window and enjoy their food. There are table seats inside of the restaurant. There's some high top tables, some low public seating. So again, qualifying under the rules of what a specialty restaurant is, only requires that we have seating for 8 people inside. We exceed that expectation. Again, it's a reuse of an existing building that exists downtown right now and bringing something to Harbor Springs that doesn't exist today. Excellent. Here to answer any questions that you guys may have, and I'm able to.
Yep. Could you stand by for a minute, Nick? Let's Would you like to open it up for public comment at this point? Before we deliberate? Okay, anyone from the public care to make a comment on this proposal? Okay, why don't we close the public comment? Are we supposed to vote on that?
In the past, we have held a motion to open for a public hearing. And then when public comment is done, then we have a motion to close the public.
Let's
hearing.
catch up on that.
That's
All in
okay.
favor of closing the public comment? Say aye. Good, okay, we're legal. All right, let's go over to Larry. Larry, what can you tell us about your analysis?
You want the long version or the short version?
The appropriate version.
Unanimous consent. Sure. I gave you a 5-page memo on all the standards within the zoning code on this. I'm going to reasonably assume you read it all. You noticed on page 2 at the top, I questioned from the submission whether they were going to have indoor or no outdoor seating or no outdoor seating. I wasn't sure from what they submitted. Mr. Lieber did identify this evening they were going to have outdoor seating, so that answered the only question that I had. They are definitely a specialty restaurant. They just fall under the size. The size requirement is 1350. You can't exceed that square footage, and they're 1348.5.
Good work.
Good work.
So that worked out perfect for them. Given that they have met all the standards of meeting the requirement of a specialty restaurant, given that they have met all the standards for site plan review, given that they have addressed all of the special use standards that Mr. Lieber had submitted to us, my suggestion would be for a positive motion to approve this for those reasons that I just stated. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry, for that very compact analysis. Commissioners, what are your thoughts? Good plan. I like it.
I don't see any reason not to. I mean, I definitely think that it's something that like downtown is missing, like an area where you can go get quick food that isn't like fast food. So, yeah.
Anyone care to make a motion on this?
Motion to approve.
Hold on, I had a motion from Bob. And who seconded? Thank you, Mark.
I had to get one in tonight.
Let's do a roll call.
Let's go do a roll call.
Just as, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please.
Mr. Toma, would your motion based upon the rationale I provided in my memo? And would it be appropriate to reference that in your motion?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Motion to approve based on the recommendation of the
Of Larry.
of Larry.
All right, fine.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I could, before you guys vote, I just want to clarify some comments. I know I said there's no public seating that would be happening on the sidewalk. There is a small section that falls within the perimeter of the footprint of the building, where they may have some chairs at the outside base of that window as well, but again, falls within their property limits, so not on the public street. But would be there for dining, so just in case that influences. Great.
Jeff,
Thank you.
as a clarification, would they still be able to apply for outdoor seating for our outdoors, our separate part of our code that we have? Did other restaurants apply for outdoor seating on public sidewalk like paper stations?
I'd have to check on that. The answer is either yes, they would be able to apply. The answer may all be that because it's on their own private property, they might not need to apply. But they would be able to do it through one of those two processes. Roll call vote. Al Dyka,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Mark Burdette,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Bob Tone,
Yes.
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, and the next item, master plan. And tonight we're having a public hearing on the master plan. And Larry, you want to set the stage for us, where we've been and so far, and what's next?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Michigan Planning Enabling Act requires every municipality in the state to review their master plan and update it if necessary every 5 years. The Planning Commission took that process up 2 years ago, ran into a lot of hurdles, one being just a little minor problem called COVID-19. And so we've been at this about 2 years now, updating our current master plan. What did we change? Basically, we reviewed and updated the background analysis and decided to move that to an appendix in the document. That was a big change. Important elements in the update was community input. We did a series of 12 surveys over several months in 2021 because we couldn't meet in public. We couldn't meet in groups because of the COVID situations. Surveys that received the highest response rate were natural character, preserving the natural character here in the city. We had 97% of the respondents fully supported the preservation of our natural resources here in the city. The idea of quaint and vibrant idea, that can be a lot of different meaning to a lot of different people. And you can go to Webster's dictionary and define that whole idea. But the charm, the quaintness, the vitality we have in this community, however you like to identify it, whether it's the waterfront parks, people thought that was 86% of them responding thought those needed to be preserved to the greatest extent possible. And our historic charm and character needed to be preserved by 82%. Natural character and quaint and vibrant were the highest two responding categories we had in that community opinion survey. Housing was kind of the third level, if you will, of importance of the community response we have. Most people favored single-family homes by 51%. Quality affordable housing was 37% positive rating, and quality and availability of housing was 32%. So these surveys that we were sending out and garnering public input about our community was kind of setting the tone for all of the areas in the master plan. Neighborhoods, quality housing, 37%, encourage single-family homes on small lots, 68%. Upkeep and maintenance and having city control to help with that process, 54%. Recreation, maintain our existing system, that depending on the level of question and what park you were talking about, that ranged from 68 to 79% of positive response from people who responded to the survey that we put out. No change in amenities, 47 to 71%, depending on the park. So they like what they have, okay, but they don't want to see a lot of it change. But looking at expanding opportunities though, in terms of hiking and walking, almost 80% of the people said, yeah, you should keep exploring that idea. Bicycling, 61, boating, 62. Recreation programs with water activities, 56% of the respondents thought that was a great idea. And waterfront use, the view of the water, 93% of the people thought that was something that we needed to work on and to preserve with future development and changes in land use. Our goals and objectives were adjusted to the community input that we received over that several month period. And the future land use itself, because there isn't really a lot of room to expand big projects. You probably saw the biggest project that I've seen in this community in land mass wise in 32 years from a land consumption standpoint. We developed an implementation strategy, became a little more detailed this time than we were in the 2014 plan, with identifying 7 strategies to 1, update our zoning code, Secondly, to look at housing and explore more in-depth opportunities here. The complete street program, sidewalks, streets, pedestrian ways, accommodating all kinds of non-motorized transportation in that system. Coordinate plan elements into our planning decision process, which we kind of did tonight a little bit, if you saw. And to look at public waterfront areas and their potential redevelopment. I know with the departure of the tennis courts downtown, is the city has been wrestling with that idea. And so that became kind of one of the 7 strategies that we need to look at over the next 7 years. So that is an overview of what the Planning Commission or former members of the Planning Commission have been working on for the last couple of years. Tonight is the opportunity to receive public comment on the plan that's been distributed. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's great. That was a nice overview of where we've been. And tonight is our public comment section. And we've received some very thoughtful letters of input by some of the folks here in the room. And I'd like to hear more about those and about anything else on the mind of the community. So all in favor of opening up the public hearing on the master plan, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. All right, public comment section is open.
As a member of the board, but public, I just want to let you know, I did submit some grammatical edits to Larry, some basic minor edits, so he has those, so they're nothing major. Just that's right.
Okay, got some too. All right. Mark and Nancy Rondell, I see you there. And you spent quite a lot of time.
Each other's letters, which is pretty interesting. We really didn't. It's pretty interesting. You want to go first? No, go ahead. We live at 181 Wall Street.
This is Mark Rondell.
Okay. Well, thank you all. And I didn't realize, Larry, that it's really been going on for 2 years. I was thinking a year. So, but anyway, I understand that you guys have been working. I've been to some of the meetings. I've watched others. And I want to thank you for your efforts on this. However, I do feel that you've come up substantially short. I feel that to some degree, a lot of the discussion, and I want to say that I wrote things down in order that I can try and stay within my 3 minutes, but I'm afraid it's going to overlap a little bit. But anyway, I think that some of the discussion that's already gone on here tonight could be avoided if we had a more thorough and more broadly based master plan. We wouldn't have to be discussing minor details about development that occurs on these properties here. We would already have answered some of the questions and some of the problems to that. If you remember, Bill, at the last meeting, I asked if how this might fit with the master plan, and I didn't hear one word yet tonight of how it might fit with the master plan. I think our master plan has been for the existence, something that gets set on the shelf and doesn't get referred to again later on, until there's a glaring instance, and one of those occurred last summer when there was discussion of changing the zoning on the lot across the street from RM to R2. And at that point, I heard the master plan explained by Larry as the master plan foresees all of this central area of our town as low density residential. And to me, that doesn't fit with the historic character of Harbor Springs. The historic character of Harbor Springs was a very centrally located city. Growth and development occurred focused on the harbor, right downtown, buildings were built, shops were built, and then housing grew sort of out from there. And yet, in our master plan now, we have stated that we're just going to keep the same residential districts that have been here for a century or more. And things have changed. People come down on me all the time for saying how I'd like to see how it was before. But things are different now, I understand that. But anyway, I think that if, regarding some of the questions that you mentioned, Larry, the questions were asked in such a fashion that they generated the answers that came back. If you ask some people on a questionnaire, do you think the city ought to provide streets? You'd get probably 100% saying, yeah, city needs to provide streets. You know, other things, police protection and so on. I don't think that the master plan as updated adequately addresses the basic fundamental priorities of what the city ought to be providing for its residents, its citizens. But firstly, I say, I don't know, if did you get people copies of this? I think we've failed to have a clear statement of vision for what kind of a town we would like to see. Do we want to become just a small clone of the resort operations around here? Or do we want to maintain a flavor as a real town? The resort operations don't have restaurants and public facilities. They're sort of private enclaves. And a town is a very different thing. And then historically, the town of Harbor Springs has been a very different thing than the resort communities around here. So I think that our master plan needs to state much more clearly a vision for the future. What we want to be, are we just going to be a special purpose community for a retirement village or second homes? Or do we really want to become a diverse town where young people could come, find employment, raise a family, and sort of maintain the character of historic Harbor Springs?
Mark, let me just stop you right there for a second. So the normal public comment rules are a 3-minute time period. This is more complicated than the usual 3-minute slot would allow, I think. We just asked the commissioner just for an assessment. Are you okay with extending the time for public comment tonight beyond the usual 3 minutes that we cover?
Yeah.
Are you willing to engage for 10 minutes or?
Is there gonna be a limit on this guy?
That's what, yeah, I was curious like how much longer.
I could go on forever.
As long as he's buying dinner.
Okay.
Are you in favor of it? Are you in favor of extending it to 10 minutes for tonight?
10 minutes more or like 10 minutes
10 minutes
total?
total. Mark's on 5 at this point. Do I have a second?
Yes, 5 more.
5 more.
Okay, go Mark 5.
Thank you, folks. Okay, I think we need to elaborate and clearly prioritize the main functions that we expect from the city, and so on. I think that the update as focused on is way too heavily related to recreation and views. I think it needs to have a focus of proactive direction of growth that I don't see in this master plan. My understanding of zoning is that it allows municipalities to zone so that they can create growth in fields that they want to see. I don't really see that in the update of the master plan. Number 4, I really think we're failing to address the reality of the massive growth in the surrounding townships versus the stagnation of growth that's occurred here for decades within the city because of these huge regulations and so on that we have, hoops that we have to jump through. This is being evidenced these days in the difficulties that the community is having with whether or not we're a town and how far the greater Harbor Springs community needs to extend and what our responsibilities as the town of Harbor Springs are to the greater Harbor Springs community of the surrounding townships and area. I think that we have a very small footprint of the commercial activities in the master plan. Commercial activities have historically been a huge component, and of this town, of the what goes on in towns. And when I was at one of the meetings here, the subject came up of whether we should add to the commercial areas or so on, and in a short sentence, oh no, it looks all right to me. So I really think there needs to be much more focus on growth and development in the commercial sector. I think we need to adequately define the terms. Quality of life, small town character, quaint, natural character, protect this, vibrant. All these terms are pretty vague and indefinite and can be used a lot of things. Views could be augmented by multi-story apartment buildings, 20 stories high. Every floor has a view of the bay. We're creating more views by building tall buildings. And we need to make this master plan functional so that we can refer back to it on a lot of day-to-day decisions. So that it's comprehensive, so that it answers the questions and we don't have to go back every time and say, well, I don't know what we should do in this case and come up with a short-term answer.
1 minute.
Okay, so basically my last point is I think we're going to have, in the future, we're going to see more and more conflicts with transportation. The best way that I see to solve that is to have people living and working and meeting their daily needs by living close and not needing transportation. But beyond that, I think we need to seriously be looking at mass transit options. We have a bay in the summertime. Ferries are an excellent mass transit option. They've been used here and other places for a long time. Buses, we used to have train service. All these things, our parking issues that we're having these days are just a spin-off from the massive reliance on automobile transportation we have. So anyway, that's my 10 minutes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your very thoughtful comments on that, Mark.
I have to stand up.
Who else would like to go?
I don't think I need to stand up. My name is Nancy Rondell. I live at 181 Zoll. And it's very interesting because we did not even, I hadn't even read my letter. So that's kind of an interesting, mine is, and you all had mine ahead of time. One of my biggest concerns is our housing. And I don't think we are addressed that enough in the master plan. I think if we truly want to have a year-round community, which I would put back in your lap, is that really what you want? Or are you okay with a very small population of year-round residents and the rest are your residents in summer resort? And I think that drives a lot of the decisions that the planning commission makes and the council makes. And I think we really need to take a look at what direction we're going. Because a lot of this master plan is very heavy toward resort, recreational, and not year-round residents, not really taking particularly good care of our year-round residents. I do think it would be helpful for you guys to do a vision statement for this. up front to say, to help you decide really what direction are you trying to go with this master plan for this community? I agree with Mark that a lot of the words that are used are really subjective, you know, vibrant, quaint, small town character. I don't know what those mean, and I bet if we asked, we'd all have different ideas. So maybe that's on purpose, so there's flexibility in the plan, but I think it's really important to understand what you're writing and what you're putting out there to surrounding communities. I have concern about the lack of commercial space in town, because if we want young families and more people here year round, if that is what you want, we have to provide for them. We have to have some way for them to live. And I think we need to look at more residential zoning in terms of multiple residential and less single family, big lot residential. I think we should look at some mixed zoning where people can live and work in the same building. To me, those things are really exciting. You know, I don't quite know why we're so afraid of some of those changes here. If we don't do something perfect the first time, we can regroup and head another direction. But I think we really need to look at that. If I'm right, 7% of the kids in the school are living in Town Harbor Springs right now. That's like 35 children. That's a huge switch from when our kids were in school. That wasn't all that long ago. And there's reasons for that. And I think if we don't make some pretty substantial changes, we're going to continue in that same direction. I know it's hard. It's hard to have change and it's hard to embrace change, but it's going to happen. And unless we manage it in a way to get the result we're looking for, we're just going to continue, I think, on the path that we are right now, which I don't see as a real positive. When nobody can live and work in town, that's not a good thing in my book at all. So that's my 10 cents worth. You know, I say a little bit more in the letter, but I think we need to look at the vision, looking to the future more. Where is it we want to go? I think it's a great job of where we've been in the past and an overview, and I think those are all good things, but I don't think we're strong enough on what direction we're trying to go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thoughtful input as well. Who else would like to go? Sir?
I'd like to go. So hi, everyone. My name is Casey Cook and I work with the Limit Watershed Council. And I wanted to start out by apologizing. So we did submit comment for tonight, but I know it was quite late this afternoon. And so you probably all have not had a chance to see those. I did bring hard copies, but I'm happy to just introduce myself tonight. Oh, you did receive them. Thank you.
They do have them.
Great, I'm glad to hear it. So thank you so much for accommodating that. I apologize for my tardiness. We're in a time of transition at Limit Watershed Council. We just had a new executive director start. And I started in my role in August. So I'm taking out a lot of the work of Dr. Granetta Tomasi, who did most of the local policy work. She retired in August. So I'm happy to be with you all here tonight. I think the key point that we hope to emphasize is that first, I want to commend you all on the master plan. I think it does a really lovely job of highlighting, you know, the really central core role that Little Traverse Bay plays in this community. And I know so many communities around the Bay. So I think it does a really excellent job. And I'm really encouraged by the feedback from the residents that our water resources and natural resources are something that is really close to their hearts and in their minds. The suggestions that are compiled come out of some grant work that we did with LIA, the Land Information Access Association. And most of them have just an eye towards climate resiliency. So based on best management practices for the changes that we're seeing, especially along Great Lakes shorelines with more rapidly fluctuating water levels and more extreme water levels, more extreme flooding and storm events. And then the other sort of piece of the suggestions are just around really incorporating a reference to the watershed as a whole. So of course, that's a little bit of bias on our part since we operate more on watershed level than the jurisdictional level. But there's a lot of work being done with the Little Traverse Bay Watershed Management Plan. And so we always are encouraging our municipalities and townships when they're reviewing their master plans to include reference to that. And we really also always want to put in a plug for just having municipal representation at those meetings, because we're trying to bring all of the stakeholders that are participating in these conversations together. So I'm always happy to answer questions, and I know, again, this is dense and you got it late in the day, so I'm happy to come to another meeting and talk about it more, and however we can be of use. And I really just appreciate the opportunity to participate in this process and to provide these resources. So thank you.
Thank you for your input. Very helpful. And do we have any other comments?
I'll just jump in real quick. I support what you were talking about. The master plan looks really great and is a good sort of guidepost to some of these strategies. And I love the fact that housing was identified specifically. You know, the vibrancy of a community really depends on access across an income spectrum and across the lifespan of our community members. And some of that has been truncated based on affordability recently. Also, the historical character of a place doesn't mean that nothing ever has to change, you know, and some of the mixed use designs and the commercial living space strategies are historically consistent with the way communities were designed a long time ago. So that doesn't necessarily mean that making those adjustments within our town limits or our village limits makes it less historically quaint or inconsistent with historical practices. So I just encourage, you know, the wide interpretive language of the master plan that you have can be used to your advantage in making some of those specific changes and saying that, yes, we are beautiful and we are special and we do want to, you know, protect our resources, and being really intentional and creating some spaces that have a little bit more density allows us to do that across the board. So.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? And do we have anybody online, Victor?
We do have people online. I don't know if they'd like to comment or not. Now's the time.
For folks who are watching remotely, would anyone like to comment on the master plan? All right, doesn't sound like it. All those in favor of closing the public hearing on the master plan, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right. Public hearing is closed. Now it's time for us to reflect a little bit on the input that we got and decide what our next course of action is.
I have a comment on it. I want to thank Nancy and Mark for their comments about the master plan and Nancy's letter that she submitted. And that's something I'd never really thought about, was a vision statement for the city. I know we have the master plan that we've worked for 2 years on. And I know many companies do vision statements. I know my husband's does. We do one as a family. And I do think it's something that kind of keeps the town or the company or the people accountable for what their vision is for the future, whether it's, you know, I want to live in Harbor Springs in 10 years, and always to think about revisiting that, like whether it's annually or quarterly, once you come up with your statement, to make sure you are moving towards it. And also there can be change to it. It doesn't mean it has to be set in stone and you have to follow it to the T. And also it can be detailed or broad, you know, however you feel. So maybe that is something that, I don't know if it's the planning commission or if it's city council or who might bring that to the forefront if that's something we decide on. But I think it's something really kind of nice to think about.
Other comments, commissioners?
Well, in support of what Emily just said and what I just heard, I do think some very good points have been raised. I do think a vision statement would be important. And, you know, perhaps a little, maybe my first thought goes towards something that the planning commission does or is part of, or certain members are, in that that would perhaps be a freer forum in which to generate some of these ideas and work towards the vision statement. And I think we have to do this like master plan every 5 years. So, you know, I don't know when that clock starts, but, you know, sort of like pre-thinking, that'd be, I think, a big aid in the next master plan, is to really consider more broader options and more thinking out of the box and have some of that stuff in place. As far as the vision statement would do that before the next master plan process starts, I think would be very helpful. Because one thing that the master plan does, it's, I think of the master plan, it just informs decisions in directions of where like a zoning ordinance would go, and it's actually the zoning ordinance that, that's our rule book, that we have to follow. But the guide is from the master plan, not totally, but partially for sure. And so a vision statement, I think, would be very helpful for us, for the next time around.
One thing I also think we need to definitely, or you guys need definitely, us as a whole need to go more in depth on is the public transportation. I know Mark brought it up. There isn't basically like any public transportation right now, and parking is becoming like a huge problem in the summer. So I definitely think we need to look at options for that and things of that sort, because it's, as the town looks to expand and get bigger, I definitely think that the parking is going to get going to become a bigger issue. So I think we need to look into that.
Can I speak to that? There's a group of people that are trying to start a mass transportation system in the county, the region right now, and make it an authority rather than have the county run it. And this community has had huge success with authorities. We're in a bunch of them now. I think they save us money. It helps us all cooperate and share a vision. But the council just in the last couple of meetings passed a resolution to support the effort to join this authority. So we're on board if the whole community and if the county budges, then I think that effort's going to move forward in a really good way. So, we are doing some of this stuff. You just don't always hear about it.
Okay. Other comments and ideas?
Housing is imperative. 95% of your firefighters don't live in Harbor Springs. At Irish Boat, I'm the employee that lives in Harbor Springs of 35 guys. Nobody lives in town. It's affordable housing. Guys that fight fires and work at Irish Boat can't afford $500,000 houses. I don't know what the answer is. We're running out of space. We keep talking about doing this and doing that and expanding where? We live on a postage stamp without annexing township property. Our ability is severely limited here.
I guess the question is, I don't know if the answer is yet, but do we believe that we ought to maybe focus more in the master plan on some housing objectives or some stronger statements about we want to offer housing to all people in all life stages and income levels? That's a strong statement. I mean, it takes us down a path that, could be quite a journey for the community.
Well, I think though, this has been going on for 2 years. And I personally like to see, a lot of work went into it, and I was not a main player in it. I was riding the coattails of it at best. But a lot of people put a lot of work into it, and I don't know if there's a deadline on it or not at this point.
It's already past the deadline.
Yeah. But I think all the points you guys bring up, I totally agree with, and I think they should be explored. Maybe we didn't focus on it soon enough, but perhaps, because there are options, multi-use structures and buildings, smaller. We've talked about in here before, allowing people to create like a secondary dwelling on their properties in certain zoning districts, and we can reduce size requirements. There's all sorts of proactive things that can be done. But I think that's months and months and months of work.
A lot of that would be in the zoning code too, but
yeah. And I think at some point maybe it should be.
Yeah.
But to address it, I think, I'm not sure, going back and restarting the process, that's a hard ask, I think, at this point. So he's quite candid with you.
Where's the property coming from now? Like right now, there's just, empty lots in downtown Harbor
Well,
Springs.
you change the definition of what a lot is. You change the size requirements, so you allow, multifamily, you allow, a 3-story building to a 2-story building. I mean, there's all sorts of, I think, techniques that can be used that, have been discussed. And I
We
think,
don't have to actually solve that in the master plan.
Yeah.
We just need to, consider how we phrase a goal or an objective, which could lead downstream to changes like that might increase density or the number of solutions.
Yeah,
I think
that's being proactive.
I think the biggest problem right now is, people are accumulating a lot of these houses as overflow. So you have 2, 3, 4 houses that they own that sit empty. We rented a house downtown in Harbor Springs this past summer, and in the wintertime, it's a ghost town. So, for the 1-2 weeks that are there, but they own it. So I don't know if it's also incorporating some like additional tax, but just to kind of stop the bleeding of them continuing purchasing all the properties for the 2 weeks out of the year. And so I don't know what the solution is either.
The annex.
Yeah, there's lots of issues, but that's sort of the point there is that, this could be a long process.
Sure.
I think it's a worthy one.
Yeah.
I definitely said it's something we should be working on in some fashion. And, maybe that's a topic for another day, is just what is that vehicle that will get us to, some better understanding of this. Maybe the vehicle is the vision statement that's been suggested, and really working on that, because that could take, a strong committee, that could take 6 months, meetings to get
It's so
something
powerful
viable.
once it's completed, then you have that to reference, throughout the year, next year, and you can, I think it's, like I said before, it's so nice that you can always change it. It's not set in stone. If, you say, in 5 years, we want to see affordable housing, and you're on year 5, but you've been working on it. So it keeps you accountable to keep revisiting it. It doesn't kind of get put in the back burner when you have a statement that gets revisited annually, quarterly, I think would be so wonderful.
So I'm hearing interest in exploring a vision statement for the community. And in the business world, trying to do these things, it's tough. It's tough. Yeah.
Maybe the suggestion there is put a goal or an objective in the plan that says that the city should formulate a vision statement. The process itself, I think, is a good idea, but I think we have 2 public comments here. We have one from Mark and Nancy. I mean, one type of public comment that is general and like ideas, like sparking ideas that maybe we should explore these different ideas. And we got from Casey, like essentially language that we can just insert, So we got 2 different types of public comments here. And I think the former we get from like Mark and Nancy we could have several meetings on each of those topics. For example, recreation is one of them, right? That we did decrease the amount of recreation in our master plan. We cut out a lot of it. But if one of the stated goals is we want to attract younger families and age diverse people here, I guarantee from my past experience, you're going to see pressure to increase recreation. So if you cut back on recreation, you're going to be less attractive to those families. So I'm not saying that's necessarily true for this case, but that is worth looking at a longer discussion, looking into some of those things more deeply to see if what we do could negatively impact our goals. Whereas then we have Casey's from the tip of the mitt where you have literally some language you can just insert into the plan. So I think we're talking about 2 different things, and I don't know, just my thoughts for that.
So I think that we have 3 main approaches we could follow. One, we could tonight pass a resolution closing the master plan, sending it on to council for approval, as is. 2, we could take these suggestions under consideration, think about them for the next meeting. And we could potentially, if there's some things in there that we want to implement, we could make those changes and make those additions. Send it back to council, right? Cool. And have another public hearing. would be a a couple month cycle or a multi-month cycle. But if,
It
there's
could go
some
on
things-
for a couple of years till it's time to do another.
Yeah, it
another-
could. That's the
Yeah.
risk. That's the risk.
I'm inclined to, if we have to put a couple patches on what we've created, let's put those patches on it, like right in the beginning of it, state that primary objective of the next round is to develop a vision statement. And if there's a couple of tweaks that are significant that we need to make, let's make those. But then let's put this on the shelf, as Mark said. And, I'm all for starting to work on the next revision soon, because it's fresh on our minds. I think that none of us are totally satisfied with what's in there. Even though we worked hard at it. I came in the middle of the process and didn't have a clue where I was. And I think we have further work to do at this table, but the law requires that we revise our master plan every so many years. And I would favor, putting this one forth. We're going to get a new planner when we do that. Larry's going to leave. And if we decided to keep working on this for a couple more years, what do you think, Larry? You gonna stick around?
No, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
So after 32 years, I'm,
Well, the longer we drag this out, the longer we stay.
yeah, not necessarily right.
Another small reminder is we did talk about having an annual review and update of our goals and objectives. Maybe not necessarily diving into the whole master plan again, but just to look at the goals and objectives each year. What ones have we accomplished? What does that make room for new goals and objectives?
Let's document that in this version so that it's there and we've made a commitment to do that.
And I support what Al is saying, and I add to it. I think we have a lot of new members on the board since we started this. And to reopen that now, I think would, just because everybody have to get up to speed, it'd be onerous. And so I think if we start with the vision, you're working on a vision statement, and the other things we've discussed now with new members, then by the time we have to face the next master plan, we'll be in a better place. And we'll be continually keeping it fresh and updating it annually.
I think a 1 year would be a good time to also, watershed councils, they have some good language here and some language that we've talked about, and maybe some language we want to incorporate. So a lot of it is a lot to look at right now, but if that's the planning commission wants to do that, obviously you can.
So we can add in a year from year, we work
can
on
make
this
an
review,
update.
we can add in and freshen up the master plan.
Yep, we don't have to do an overhaul.
No.
The requirement is
There you go.
you have to do it every 5 years. Doesn't say you can't do it every 6 months if you wanted to.
Right. I'm in favor of moving things forward as best we can to get the process started. But I think the vision statement is such a strong suggestion, and we can make modest changes in this, right? Modest changes.
You mean now?
Now.
Oh, sure.
now.
Yeah, you can make modest
Right now.
changes.
You can make as many changes as you want right now.
Yes.
Without having to restart the clock.
Because what you're getting the public feedback right now
Yeah.
and making any changes you want or think is appropriate based on that public feedback, then send it to council. And then council will say yes or no, or kick it back to you. So you can make what changes you want
Okay.
right now. And this is the time to make changes. Because what could happen is you could say no changes, it goes to council, and council could say, wait, we want some changes. And then that would drag down the process more then, so.
All right. My suggestion, I think the vision statement is such a strong suggestion. I'm suggesting we add it as a goal. Somewhere in one of our existing paragraphs, let's say, the city will develop a vision statement, concise, descriptive vision statement that will guide future planning.
pick up some of the points that we had.
Within a year
I think we
or?
could. Letter as
Well,
to what that should include.
The time limit is usually, sorry, Al, to answer Emily, she was asking a question there about time limit for the goals. I don't know how common it is to put a time limit inside an actual master plan. What usually you do is you have the implementation matrix, and then the planning commission reviews that implementation matrix and prioritizes the goals that they want for that year. It's not very common to put, we're gonna do this in 1 year.
Master.
I'm not saying it can't be done, but what I don't want to happen is, have these time limits in our goals. And then if we don't meet them, what happens? I mean,
They can get scooched. They can get scooched to 9 months, or that's why I feel like you're still kind of accountable, but you're just revisiting things that the city wants, whether it's, more views of the water or you want affordable housing. It just doesn't get forgotten, and it's in the master plan tucked away and you only see it every 5 years. It's something that, it gets revisited, like I said, annually or quarterly, and it's just fresh for people that things can get checked off, if you want to call it a check off or accomplished. And then some get moved and maybe they don't take 5 years, maybe they take 10, but at least you're, as a committee in a city, discussing it and getting ideas and feedback from the community.
I think that's a good point also that Mark had brought up as well, is that, and even Jeff acknowledged it before, is that, for several years, the master plan was even looked at, when we made decisions or, city was doing things, we made a document and it was kind of just there so I think the planning commission, city council and other boards and staff need to be more open to and willing and thoughtful and cognizant of actually using the master plan when they're making decisions and looking at projects, looking at developments, whether it's from the planning commission perspective, the tree board, the harbor commission, whatnot. I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. So that would help us if we have the master plan out, be like, all right, there's no law that says I have to look at the master plan, but as a city policy, just procedure, the master plan is going to be by our side when we look at a project. So we need to get in the habit of that because it is our guide. A little off topic there, but.
I have a question. Okay, so the master plan is approved, passed, signed, sealed, and delivered. Can you change?
Gosh, I wish it was that easy.
Well, can you change the master plan in 2 years?
Sure, you can change it every year.
You take this section of the master plan and
Toss it, put it in something
Okay,
else.
okay.
Sure you can. You have to go through the same process to do that every time. All right. The reason the 5-year idea is in the law is because communities historically were only doing it every 10 and 20 years. Okay, and back 30 and 40 years ago, there was a lot of more change then going on than there is today with land development. And the legislature found with a lot of encouragement from planners that we need to have this done more frequently. Generally, a master plan, generally speaking, the master plan is a guide to land development policies in the community. It provides you direction generally when land is coming up for rezoning. Thus, it came up across the street here for that process. Site planning, not so much. Change of use, not at all generally. Okay, where your zoning code, your development regulations, law, remember, a plan is only a policy document. Comments this evening I think are great. Having a vision statement in a master plan, I've been at this 47 years now, and I don't think I've ever had anybody request a vision statement in a master plan. It's either going to be so broad that it's going to be, okay, what's that say?
This is the master plan.
This is the master plan vision. What is that? I mean, the master plan itself.
It is the vision.
It is a vision. I don't think there's a topic in our goals section that isn't important in this community. Every single one of those goals is important. Now, through the community opinion survey, some have a little more importance than the other. It doesn't necessarily mean that none of them are important. One of the most important things, I think, on your agenda coming up is going to be rewriting the zoning code comprehensively. That's going to be a gigantic task. That's going to take more than 6 months, trust me. Okay, no matter who's involved with it, it's going to take a lot of effort. You're going to deal with a lot of other issues moving down that road simultaneously with those other issues. If you want to try to develop a vision statement, I think that's a good idea. My suggestion would be in the implementation section of the zoning, of the master plan, add to those 7 ideas that are there, the development of a vision statement for the master plan. Okay, to implement that idea. It's overarching. It doesn't have to be specifically stated as a goal or even mentioned. But you could certainly put in the implementations based on public input during the master plan process. The Planning Commission is committed to developing a vision statement to be associated with the next master plan. Okay. That gives you a time frame, 5 years, give or take. It doesn't commit you to doing it though in 5 years, because you may find it to be impossible to do, to be very honest. But the master plan is the vision. It's where we're going. Water quality, environment, trees, the housing. It talks about the downtown. We've been through the downtown before. I mean, we ask questions. Do you want taller buildings in this town? Cool. You may not remember the answers to those questions, but it was a resounding, heck no. We like it the way it is. We do have live work in this town. Right downtown. Our zoning code from back in the 70s permitted live work. It doesn't say live work. You have commercial downstairs. You have the potential of residential upstairs. It doesn't have, if you will, the modern language we use today in our zoning codes, but it's there. We looked at exploring the opportunity of taking the CBD and moving down 3rd Street at one time. It was long enough ago, the Planning Commission went from the old City Hall where we were having this discussion and walked down the street and we evaluated every single property and house and everybody thought this is a good idea. We took it to public hearing and the Planning Commission looked at me and said, who thought of this idea? After they just got toasted for about an hour in public by the people responding to that idea. Okay. Planning commissions haven't touched that issue since, to be honest with you, because they got toasted pretty bad. I took a lot of heat that night. That's okay. That's my job. But Vanessa, you've been there. So we need to be cognizant of what we want this community to be. Excellent on-point question. I use another nice community as an example. Many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, the city of Traverse City said, we want to be a regional power. We want to be a real destination, just not a resort town. And they did that. They did all kinds of changes and improvements. And every once in a while, I'll run into somebody who was living in the city back in that time frame in some other remote community. And they say that move destroyed the quaintness, the character of Traverse City by making it a regional hub. Just thoughts, experiences, things that I have experienced over my time. So you got to be careful what you ask for when we want to change. You got to think about what that is going to do to the fabric of this community. I drove around town today. I got here a little early and I was reminded from some old pictures that I had, 8, 9 years ago of the change that's been occurring in this town. And it's subtle, it's minimal over time. Remember the old hotel where the Mossberg project is now with 2 big houses in the commercial area along Main Street. That used to be an old hotel back in that area. We've seen a lot of new housing improvements go on. We've seen lots of development and lots that have been obtained and big houses put on them. And some gigantic houses put out on Glen Drive. They've always been there though. Layton Park though hasn't really changed a whole lot. Now, I don't know what the housing values are or the property values are in that area. But so far development hasn't attacked the redevelopment of Layton Park. That's pretty affordable housing the way it looks today in this community. It's not the $500,000, the $800,000 dwelling. It just depends on what we want to think about as affordable housing in Harbor Springs that is a very compact community. These are all issues you need to think about, talk about, and as planners, those as on the planning commission, the changes that you make, you need to give a lot of thought to what is that going to do? How is that going to change our communities? Your predecessors have always given that a lot of thought when ideas come forward about changing things. Yes, they've been slow about changing the zoning code. Very purposely. I read an article the other day, last comment, a community down in, it's either North or South Carolina, abolished parking regulations in the central business district. Totally abolished it. You have no standard. Thinking behind that is the people that are trying to do business there will in fact figure out parking on their own because their business depends on it. Interesting idea. One of the first questions I was ever asked here back in 1990, we have a parking problem. We have a parking problem. I said, well, when is this problem so prevalent? Well, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. Also, 3 times a year, we have a parking problem. And so we want to do what? We investigated carriage rides, transit from down here, where utility poles used to be out here in the yard. I don't know if any of you, Al, can remember that. I see a station too. Yeah, this used to be the DPW down here. This wasn't a very pleasant area. Major changes that have occurred when we moved the DPW up the hill. But the whole notion is when you're at a party, where does everybody congregate? In the kitchen. Not the hugest room in the house, but what do people do? They're close together. Remember those days? Used to crowd around in the kitchen. That's where everybody went. The rest of the house is, a few people here and there. Downtown is that way. If it's crowded, it's busy, this is the place I want to be because it's attracting people. So what if I got to walk a few blocks to get there? Do we have a problem? I can go downtown right now, park anywhere. I can go down here middle of the day and park anywhere. Do we have a problem? Or is it just, I can't park in front of the store I want to go to problem? Okay, so you have to think about what you're trying to resolve, about what it's going to do to this community. We've looked at tearing down buildings, providing parking lots, providing parking structures. Does that make sense in Harbor Springs? What does that do to the fabric of this community? The look, the feel?
Well, that's
Mr. Chairman.
probably beyond that last question, probably beyond the scope of the master plan. And, but there, I take your point. Thank you for that. And I did some quick research on vision statements in master plans too. And the couple of main templates I looked at didn't have a vision statement in there, but doesn't mean we can't. But I did find 3 or 4 communities that did have nice compact vision statement. I thought they were pretty good. And I am interested in launching that as an exercise for our city. I think it would be helpful. I don't know how the heck we do it. I don't know who leads it. I don't know how much public input we get, but maybe it's just us, roughing one out just as a starting point. So I don't want to lose that concept. I would like to put it in the master plan somewhere, whether it's in the implementation on page 23 the key activities that we're gonna follow. I think that'd be fine, but I think we ought to just get it in there as an action step. And how do people feel about that?
I think that implementation matrix section is a better place for it because I was looking at the goals. Goals are specific topics, housing, natural care. It just doesn't seem like there'd be a specific goal. There's just, it would have to be, unless it's its own goal.
So that as well. So my thought is, if we could do that and we could move this forward pretty much as is with the minor changes we've made, then we can get to work on the implementation, including the vision statement, and then including the zoning code. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
Do we get a motion for that? We just
I don't know. How do people, are you in support of that idea?
And that vision statement, is that based on the master plan now or what we see in the
It would be
future?
a clean sheet of paper. I should say, what do we want for our town over the next 10 years? Let's say. People,
I'm in favor of that.
all right, thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
Other nodding head.
All right, so
You do have a draft resolution.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if this was handed out.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For your consideration, now we can add into here. As the addition of a implementation strategy as a or a mission statement under the and maybe that would be best on the back page on the findings of fact. We just added to also to add a implementation strategy of development of a mission statement.
Great. And I would love that to be number one. I think that's number one on our implementation list. I think it could feed our other priorities there. So would anyone care to make a motion to adopt the resolution that Larry has drafted for us with the addition of implementation step of writing a vision statement for the city?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Can that also include grammatical edits that I sent out?
Sure.
There's no substantial changes. It's just commas, et cetera.
Yeah. Jeff, take us through a
Roll call. Rick Tarczynski. Oh, he stepped out.
He's not up for a second.
We'll get back to him. Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Emily DeBay,
Yes.
Bob Toman,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Bill Walden,
yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Barry Leskard,
Yes.
Al Dyke,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski.
Rick is back. Let's tell Rick what he's voting on.
Rick doesn't know.
Say yes.
We're voting on a resolution to adopt or move on the master plan to the.
Yes. We also made you the chair.
Okay.
Secretary and treasurer.
Thanks for drafting the vision plan for us, Rick. Motion passes.
I look forward to next week.
All right, motion passes. Thanks. That closes our discussion on the master plan. And now we're into some technical stuff. And Victor, what do you need from us on this FEMA floodplain Emmett County?
Basically, to adopt the resolution of an updated floodplain ordinance, when we put in the spillway, FEMA required just an updated zoning ordinance. And then there's also some other information on an agreement with we have to have an agreement with the county on the floodplain as well as, and this goes to council. So really it's just standard approve the FEMA required, federal required resolutions for.
And are you looking for us to give council our okay on something and they execute
To
it?
give an approval because it's a zoning ordinance update. So let me see why this is not moving.
I had a brief discussion, I think, with Jim Raymer with the question of which ones of these needed to come to the planning commission. His recommendation was to have all of them come to the planning commission for review and approval, even if that approval is to just move that forward, because I think some of them require city council action as well, Victor.
Yeah.
Even if that approval is to then move it along to city council, that you're for these motions and for us, continuing our role in monitoring FEMA floodplain activity and enforcement.
Great. So the net of this is that we're designating Emmett County Building Department to enforce the FEMA floodplain regulations. By doing that, it lets our residents buy flood insurance. If we don't do it, then they can't buy flood insurance. Victor, is that a fair description?
Yep, we're also designating the flood zone area, what area is a new flood zone, basically. But essentially, yes, and there's rules for managing that floodplain and et cetera. So, but basically, yeah, you summed it up.
Okay. Is there any downside to this? Any risk?
If we don't do it,
Any risk to doing it?
No.
Okay.
we already spent the money.
Sounds like it's all upside to us.
And again, this is something that we're already currently doing. We're redoing this, renewing our vows with FEMA, because they've produced these new maps.
Okay. Need a motion from us, or do you
Yeah.
just need assent?
Yeah, we need a motion to approve.
Commissioner,
Oh,
is
I'll
anybody
make that.
motivated to make a motion?
I'll make that.
Second, great. Restate that motion was to approve all three of these agreements?
Yes.
Great.
Let's start with Mark Boudet,
Yes.
Barry Leskart,
Yes.
Al Dyken,
Yes.
Rick Darchinsky,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Emily Dubé,
Yes.
Bob Thomas,
Yes.
George Beat,
Yes.
Bill Mulder.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, that closes out our agenda. And now it's time for member comments. Anybody have any additional thoughts?
I'm not a
comments?
member, but I just really quickly want to say that going back to Casey's, I really think these typical watersheds should be considered at our year review, because there's a lot of good information in here. So I don't know about all of them. But anyway, the second one is that we did get so far one application for our planning consultant position, and that's from Beckett and Rader. So we are looking for planning consultants or a planning consultant to replace Larry. Well, he's not to replace him, he's retiring. But so if you know anyone, I know Bill, you sent me one suggestion you met, if you know anyone that's willing to or wants to be, so we have more than just one to look at, please pass them along. I prefer, when I put the advertisement out, I prefer, based on talking with the community, prefer someone who has experience with small towns as well as with resort communities, just because that's what we are. But again, there are limited amount of people that are up in northern Michigan, so I understand that there's.
How about a part-time job?
I have one right now, doing this.
Oh,
All right, are there any other member comments or any suggestions how we could be more effective or anything that I can do better?
We need a gavel.
All right, then let's close this meeting. We're adjourned. Thank you.